TomoNews presents the most shocking plane crashes, Part 1.
At least 12 dead after TransAsia flight crashes into Taipei's Keelung River. At least 12 people are confirmed dead after a TransAsia ATR 72-600 crashed into the Keelung River in New Taipei City on Wednesday morning. Flight GE235 had taken off only moments before the pilot transmitted a mayday call to report engine failure. Air traffic control lost contact with the plane at 10:55 a.m. Many of the 58 people on board, including 5 crew and 2 children, were able to exit the wreckage and swim to the riverbank. The French-made twin prop had just taken off from Taipei's Songshan Airport, crashing 5 minutes into its planned 55-minute journey to Taiwan's Jinmen Island, just off China's coast. Rescue crews were scrambled to the river, and machinery has been deployed to help emergency services cut into the fuselage and get access to those still trapped inside the partially submerged plane. The driver of the taxi struck by the doomed plane as it clipped the bridge has survived.
Engine flameout cited as possible cause of deadly Taiwan air crash. An engine flameout has been cited as a possible cause of the deadly Wednesday air crash in Taiwan, when a TransAsia Airways plane crashed, killing at least 25 people. The TransAsia ATR 72-600 turboprop aircraft was flying with 58 people on board from Taipei's Songshan Airport to the island of Jinmen on Wednesday morning. The plane was cleared for takeoff at 10:52 a.m. and minutes later experienced mechanical issues involving one of its engines. One of the pilot's final communications was "Mayday, Mayday, engine flameout," according to a recording played on local news stations. A flameout is the extinction of the flame in the engine's combustion chamber and has several causes, including mechanical failure and fuel starvation. Another possible cause of a flameout is a bird strike. The stalled plane clipped an expressway and hit a taxi as it descended before ploughing into the Keelung River. The accident is the second TransAsia plane to crash in 7 months. In July last year, 48 people were killed when a TransAsia flight crashed as it attempted to land in Taiwan's Penghu Island.
1 in a million chances, driver of taxi hit by plane survived. In case you're unfamiliar with the news, a TransAsia Airways plane crashed into the river in the city of Taipei this week. Shocking dashcam video shows the plane as it careens past a highway bridge, the edge of one wing clipping a taxi seconds before the plane crashes into the river. The driver of the taxi, Mr. Zhou Zidong, age 52, said that he didn't even see the plane. He said all he felt was a sudden forceful impact, and he yanked on the steering wheel to keep his car from losing control and going over the side of the bridge. After the car came to a stop, Mr. Zhou said he passed out briefly, waking up to discover he was completely covered in glass. Mr. Zhou's passenger at the time was a 26-year-old woman who sustained no injuries other than the shock of her life. After being rushed to hospital, Mr. Zhou was informed he'd been hit by a plane. Shards of glass also flew into Mr. Zhou's right eye, and doctors say he may need a minor surgery to remove the glass, but it shouldn't affect Mr. Zhou's vision. The front of Mr. Zhou's poor taxi was nearly sheared in half by the impact of the edge of the wing. A few more inches, and it would have been Mr. Zhou. What are the chances of being hit by a plane while driving down the highway and surviving the accident? Mr. Zhou should definitely consider buying some lottery tickets.
Black box data reveals Taiwan plane engine failure. New details have emerged about the final moments of TransAsia Airways Flight 235, which crashed into a river shortly after takeoff on Wednesday in Taipei, killing at least 35 people. Preliminary findings from the plane's data recorder were revealed at a press conference Friday held by Taiwan's Aviation Safety Council. An official from the council told how, as the plane reached 1,200 feet just 37 seconds after takeoff, the right-hand engine sounded a warning indicating a problem. In response to the alarm, the pilots throttled back the left-hand engine. A few seconds later, the right engine auto-feathered, an automatic setting designed to reduce drag during an engine failure. Another 6 seconds later, the first of 5 stall warnings sounded, lasting for approximately 6 seconds. The pilots then attempted to restart the left-hand engine. The crew then radioed the tower, wrongly reporting a flameout or a loss of combustion. Further attempts to restart the stalled engines failed before the plane clipped an expressway, hitting a taxi before ploughing into the Keelung River. Officials said a fuller report into the crash will be available within the next 30 days, while the final report is expected in the next 3 to 6 months.
Germanwings A320 crash. Horror flight's final minutes recreated.
Germanwings plane crashes in French Alps. 148 people are feared dead after a Germanwings Airbus crashed in southern France on Tuesday. The Airbus A320, operated by Lufthansa's budget Germanwings airline, had 142 passengers and 6 crew members on board when it went down over the French Alps on Tuesday morning. The plane was en route from Barcelona to Düsseldorf. It disappeared near the town of Barcelona, about 100 kilometers north of Nice. The pilot reportedly issued a distress call at 10:47 a.m. and the plane disappeared from radar at around 11:20 a.m. The French Interior Ministry said debris from the plane had been located near Barcelona at an altitude of 2,000 meters.
Flight 4U-9525 co-pilot intentionally locked out the captain. The co-pilot of the Germanwings Flight 4U-9525, Andreas Lubits, was locked inside the cockpit by himself at the time of the crash. But why is it that the captain was unable to re-enter the flight deck? According to an Airbus video describing the standard procedure for entering the flight deck, the captain of the Airbus A320 would have requested re-entry into the cockpit by first notifying the co-pilot by phone that he wanted to enter, before pressing the hashtag on a keypad outside the cockpit door. A buzzer would then sound for 3 seconds inside the cockpit, alerting the co-pilot to unlock the door, something Lubits didn't do. If it were a case of an incapacitated pilot, the captain could have entered a numerical code that would trigger an override of the lock. The alert would then sound for 30 seconds before the door unlocks, giving the person outside 5 seconds to enter. However, this emergency unlock process can be overridden by manually switching the control to the lock position. In this case, the keypad and buzzer are deactivated, and the door remains locked for 5 minutes, unless otherwise unlocked from inside the flight deck. He operated this button for a reason we don't know yet, Marseille prosecutor Bryce Robin told reporters. But it appears that the reason was to destroy this plane.
Germanwings crash, pilot locked out of cockpit before impact. More questions surrounding Tuesday's Germanwings plane crash that killed 150 people have arisen after audio collected from the cockpit voice recorder revealed that one of the pilots was locked outside of the cockpit before the crash. The Germanwings Airbus A320 was travelling with 144 passengers and 6 crew from Barcelona to Düsseldorf. The Lufthansa-owned budget airliner jet descended from 38,000 feet to 6,000 feet in around 8 minutes before crashing into a mountainside in the southern Alps. The New York Times quoted an investigator as saying that one of the pilots left the cockpit during the flight. He can be heard trying to get back into the cockpit before the crash, but failed to do so. The jetliner then slammed into a mountain ravine, pulverizing the plane completely. There were no survivors. French, German and Spanish leaders have arrived at the crash site ahead of an international tribute for the 150 victims.
Leaked black box transcript reveals Germanwings pilot's last-minute desperation. A German newspaper claiming to have a transcript of the cockpit voice recording from Germanwings Flight 4U9525 has revealed the flight's captain pleaded desperately to be let back into the cockpit in the minutes before the plane crashed into the French Alps. Officials have not released the audio obtained from the black box, which, yes, is actually orange, but according to leaked reports, the recovered black box from the Germanwings aircraft contains 1.5 hours of audio from the cockpit, cabin, and alarm systems. In the recording, the captain apologizes to passengers for the delayed takeoff, then tells co-pilot Andreas Lubits he never had the chance to use the bathroom in Barcelona. When the plane hits cruising altitude at 10:27, Lubits tells Captain Patrick Sonheimer, "You can go now," and 2 minutes later he does. The plane starts descending almost immediately, dropping 1,000 feet by 10:30. 2 minutes later, the plane has dropped an additional 6,000 feet. At 10:35, it's just 23,000 feet from the ground. 90 seconds later, a final siren sounds. Ground, pull up, while the captain yells, "Open the damn door," and passengers scream in the background. At 10:40, the plane's right wing can be heard clipping the mountainside. Passengers scream one last time before the audio goes silent. Black box recordings are rarely released this early into a crash investigation, and prosecutors have only confirmed that Lubits purposely locked Captain Sonheimer out of the cockpit and sent the plane into its deadly descent. Officials did reveal they found a pile of pills at Lubits' apartment in Düsseldorf, as well as several ripped-up doctor's notes that deemed the co-pilot unfit to work between March 16th and March 29th. Lubits reportedly never told Germanwings about his mental illness.
A Malaysia Airlines flight carrying nearly 250 people is feared to have crashed into the Gulf of Thailand, south of a Vietnamese island. Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur at 12:41 a.m. local time. Bound for Beijing, the airliner lost contact with air traffic control 2 hours later, 153 miles south of Vietnam's Quoc Island. On board were 12 crew and 227 passengers of 14 nationalities, including 152 Chinese. A statement from the Vietnamese Navy suggests the plane crashed into the ocean from an altitude of 10,700 meters. At 2:40 a.m., Subang Air Traffic Control lost contact with the plane. Chinese naval vessels have joined an international air and sea search and rescue effort. The Boeing 777-200 has a nearly impeccable safety record. An aviation expert who spoke to the Guardian newspaper said online flight data indicates the plane experienced a rapid loss of altitude and a sudden change in direction. People are fearing the worst.
As anxious people await news of their missing loved ones, sources close to the investigation say they've begun to narrow their focus on the strong possibility that the Malaysian Airlines plane broke up while cruising at over 30,000 feet. Reuters reports that an unnamed Malaysian official investigating the disappearance of flight MH370 says his team is moving towards the theory that the jetliner disintegrated mid-flight. Past experience shows that when a plane hits water at high speed, the breakup of the jet leaves a concentrated field of debris that is generally easy to locate. However, if a plane disintegrates while still high above the Earth, the debris field can be scattered over a very wide area, making it hard to locate the exact site of the jetliner's remains. After reports that the plane may have turned around before dropping off radar screens, Thai ships are now searching the Western Andaman Sea, while Malaysia concentrates on searching in the Gulf of Thailand and the South China Sea. As of March 9th, some 40 planes, 24 ships, and various aircraft and vessels from Malaysia, Australia, Indonesia, and Vietnam were searching waters where the plane may have gone down. Chinese naval vessels will arrive on site and join the search March 10th. Malaysia Airlines flight far off course. As desperate friends and relatives await news on Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, new info from the Malaysian military is refocusing search efforts. Missing Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 took off at roughly 40 minutes after midnight March 8th and was scheduled to arrive in Beijing at 6:30 a.m. Malaysian civilian radar lost contact with the plane at 1:22 a.m., with reports indicating the plane's transponder may have been shut off. On Tuesday, Malaysia's military confirmed they had tracked the plane until 2:40 a.m. as it turned around and headed over the Strait of Malacca, raising questions about why civilian air control lost contact and why the Malaysian military took so long to confirm it had tracked the flight. The search area has now been moved west to the Strait of Malacca and the Andaman Sea. Meanwhile, investigators have identified the two men traveling on stolen European passports. The men appear to be Iranian asylum seekers with no known terrorism connections. Authorities released pictures on Tuesday of the men traveling with false documents and say they will continue searching for the lost plane until it is found.
Malaysia plane's communications systematically shut down. New reports state that US officials now believe the communications of missing Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 were deliberately shut down. The flight disappeared 40 minutes after takeoff from Kuala Lumpur International Airport, bound for Beijing. Its last known position was in airspace above the South China Sea, roughly midway between Malaysia and Vietnam. US officials told ABC News that they believe the plane's data reporting system was shut down at 1:07 a.m. The source also said the transponder was then shut down at 1:21 a.m., indicating that communications were turned off systematically. This information, along with news that the flight continued to ping a satellite with engine status information for up to 4 hours after disappearing from contact, has led the US to send the USS Kidd to the Indian Ocean to begin a search in the area. Malaysian officials have said they are continuing to look into every lead in the search for the missing plane.
Possible reasons why passengers on board Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 did not call for help. Many are now wondering whether passengers on board the missing Malaysia Airlines plane noticed anything wrong during the flight, and if they did, why no one called for help. Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 disappeared in the middle of the night, and many passengers on board were likely asleep and unaware anything was amiss. Although passengers can see the plane's location on screens aboard the aircraft, these screens can be turned off from the cockpit. Passengers may use mobile phones while the plane is at roughly 3,000 feet, but mobile phones are unlikely to work at 30,000 feet or higher, where it's almost impossible for them to acquire signals from towers on the ground. Passengers aboard United Flight 93, which was intended to be used as part of a terrorist attack in the U.S. on September 11, 2001, were able to make phone calls because they used GTE airphones. This technology, which relies on radio waves to communicate with the ground, is no longer in use. Although Malaysia Airlines offers an air-to-ground phone service in business class that also allows passengers to send email, this can also be shut down from the cockpit. If the cabin was depressurized during flight, passengers may have lost consciousness. Even those who were able to use oxygen masks may have lost consciousness after 15 minutes as oxygen levels depleted. Families of those on board flight MH370 are growing increasingly anxious as officials continually come up empty-handed in the search for the aircraft. 26 countries are now involved in the search that has been expanded to an area twice the size of Africa.
Missing flight pilot make mystery phone call before takeoff. Captain Zahari Akmasha, who were you calling? According to the latest report from British newspaper The Sun, investigators looking into the mysterious disappearance of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 are now focusing on a new lead. They were trying to find out who Captain Shah spoke to in the cockpit minutes before the plane took left Kuala Lumpur. This mysterious phone call is now coming under scrutiny, as it might be related to the reason the plane went missing. But Malaysian authorities have so far refused to comment. Another clue the investigators are looking into is a large amount of flying history data that was deleted from Captain Shah's home flight simulator on February 3rd. The FBI is now also reportedly assisting restore the flight history files to see whether they can find anything in the hope of piecing together what may have happened on the plane. Now, the two main directions of the investigation are focusing on the captain, even though the authorities still consider Shah innocent until proven guilty. The leader of Malaysia's opposite party, Anwar Ibrahim, has criticized the slow progress of the investigation. Anwar has also condemned the media for highlighting the family relationship between him and Captain Shah, saying the media is just trying to blur the focus. Anwar has also pointed out that Captain Shah was not even supposed to captain flight MH370 and that he was assigned to it at the very last minute.
10 days on, Malay investigators say missing jetliner is a criminal act. 10 days after the disappearance of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370, Malaysian authorities say they are treating the case as a criminal investigation. Closing in on 2 weeks since MH370 went missing, a conclusion is gelling that there was criminal intent, as the airliner would not have been able to fly so far off course without assistance. Malaysian investigators are looking into the background of each passenger on the flight to determine if they had any piloting experience. While military radar has confirmed the plane turned around and headed over the Bay of Bengal, it isn't known if the plane then flew northwest or southwest. Considering the well-guarded airspace over India and Pakistan, as well as US military installations in Afghanistan, experts say it's unlikely the plane could have evaded detection by flying northwest, making a crash in the Indian Ocean more plausible. Malaysian authorities searched the homes of both pilots over the weekend with special attention paid to an elaborate flight simulator found in the pilot's home. Investigators are now scouring a massive area that extends over thousands of kilometers. The missing Malaysian Airlines flight is one of the most mysterious aviation mysteries of recent times, as 10 days without confirmation of the location of wreckage or debris from a crashed flight is highly unusual.
Math professor thinks he may have solved MH370 mystery. A new study by a team of researchers, led by Professor Gong Chen at Texas A&M University in Qatar, proposes an answer to the mysterious disappearance of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. The study suggests that the plane may have entered the water at an angle of close to 90 degrees, with the large, heavy portions of the plane, notably the wings, breaking off on impact. This model suggests the plane sank belly up, with the fuselage intact, and minimal creation and spread of debris. The heavier portions of the plane sank directly to the bottom of the ocean. The team, led by Professor Gong Chen at Texas A&M University in Qatar, ran 5 different landing scenarios, including one replicating the Miracle on the Hudson landing in 2009. Chen considered the Hudson glide ditching approach an unlikely outcome given the higher rate of survivability and creation of larger debris fields on failure. The flat landing was ruled out as it would have caused the plane to bounce, breaking up the fuselage and creating a wide path of debris and oil. Chen's team also dismissed a less dramatic nose-first diving entry, as the stress placed on the plane by impact would also have ruptured large sections of the plane. However, the report stressed that no conclusion on MH370's fate could truly be reached until the plane's black box is located and decoded.